Okay, I'm just setting up the live stream, so bear with me. Okay, I think we're good to go. So I'm just going to check the sound levels, make sure everything's looking okay. I'm going to turn the airplane down a little bit because it could get, I don't know, could get noisy. So I bought the Constellation at lunchtime today. I had a look at it at dinner time and had enough time to race through and write up some startup procedures. I couldn't actually get hold of the documentation for it. So there's a bug on the website at the moment. It would appear somebody at Red Wing has put the Google Docs file for the documentation in the bin by accident, which I think is quite amusing. Anyway, so I cribbed from other people who worked through the checklist and had a look at the checklist myself within the airplane. I'll show you it in a moment. And then wrote up my own procedure with shortcut keys and where to look for switches and all the rest of it. So it should be okay. So Christian is saying in the live stream comments, this thing is so complicated, I have the crew start it for me. It's not actually that bad. Not if you run through it, which I'm about to do. I'm going to start it completely manually with no assistance. It's not actually too bad. So let's go and check. Okay, yep, you can hear me. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to go and get an Xbox controller and plug it in and let you have a look around the airplane before we get going. So for those that haven't seen the Constellation in the sim, we're going to have a pan around it in slow motion, I guess. So we just power up the Xbox controller. We have to say keep default and resume. And then, so if I go to the outside view and then slow down the Xbox controller, there we go. So we'll have a look around it on the ground. So it's nicely made. It is getting on a bit though in the simulator, and Red Wing are not renowned for making the most polished models. So it's kind of functional. It doesn't get the best frame rates either. But I think it's just a story that things have moved on a little bit since this first came out. It came out, quite early in the life of flights in 2020. It's a hell of an achievement, really, what they managed to jam pack into it. So if you go and look in detail, it actually has got cylinder heads and things in there, in the engines. It's interesting. Obviously, it's of its era. I think that's what you might say about that. It kind of screams late 40s, early 50s, doesn't it? So there may be some military liveries that come with it. There's a lot of liveries with it. So you can see it's got the things like the covers on the pitot tubes and things like that. And there's various covers on the engines. Let's go and have a look up and down. It's like, yeah, you can see where it's quite simplified in terms of things like the connections for the gear. But yeah, you can see here it's got the covers over the exhausts. It's got these whacking great radial engines on it. You can change the configuration. It's showing tip tanks at the moment, which I think it does by default. You can change that. It's nice how they've got the material modelling to include the... Well, it's not really bump mapping anymore. It's not done in such a simple way anymore, but you can see it's not perfect. And if we look inside, you've actually got people. Let's see if we can slow the drone camera down just a little bit. Way! And they're all animated, which is quite amusing. And they do respect the loadout of the aircraft, so you can choose who's sitting where. Yeah, it's quite cool, isn't it? People do seem to be wearing the clothes of the era as well. Some of them do, at least. I haven't gone through any of these walls with it, so I don't know if it's modelled. No, it isn't. So the cabin is modelled, but the other parts of the building or of the structure are not. Okay, so should we go and let's go and have a look in the cockpit? Because everybody seems to... I was terrified of this airplane, I will freely admit. So yeah, so it doesn't actually show it from the drone camera. Okay, let's go and leave the drone camera behind then. We'll look around in the cockpit ourselves. So you will notice I have removed the chair and the co-pilot and my own chair so we can look around easily. That can all be controlled. There is this clipboard within the cockpit. So if we just get that clipboard back out, this has got the controls to manipulate the airplane. So you can have type of flight, you could have easy, normal or realistic. We're just going to go with normal. You can have cold start or ready for takeoff, which obviously is going to shortcut getting you into the air. You've got various options about using the APU. Visibility options. So again, this is what I was saying. We can show the co-pilot and his seat, for example. If I now turn around, he'll be in my way. So we can magic him out of the way, which is quite useful in this cockpit because, as you will see, it had 3 crew, or 4 crew if you include the radio officer behind us. So you've got engineering station over here, and everything works. Then you've got the co-pilot station and the pilot station, obviously. The pilot and co-pilot are mirrors of each other. So, you know, they are very, very similar. Obviously, the engineer looks after the engines. Obviously, the pilots do get another set of controls for the engines, but the engineer can actually do everything from his console as well. It's an autopilot. It's very similar to the DC-6 autopilot. You've got a clutch control here. There's a gyro you have to spin up during the ground preparations, but there's a clutch control basically that grabs the control cables. And then you've got automated systems to, or I say automated, you can control heading and you can control pitch. But otherwise, it's up to you to monitor altitude, climb rate, and so on and so forth. And you can, as I said, you can control pitch, but there's no speed control, no auto throttles here. So it's up to you to keep an eye on things. It does do VOR lock. So let's go and turn, actually, while we're doing this, I'm going to turn off the accessibility tooltips because they'll get in our way. Also, I want to show you one of the difficulties of not having them switched on. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, the level of polish isn't quite as good as the more modern aeroplanes that have come out in the sim, but it's still very good. Oh, of course, all the stuff overhead works as well. So radios are overhead, and the ignition and the external lights. So let's go and run through the procedure. The first difficulty you will face if you go and buy this aeroplane is the default views aren't great. Or if you are interested, this is to say, the problem you will face if you are interested in doing everything yourself, which I was. So Control 1 shows you the engineer station. Control 2 looks out of the window. Control 3 looks out of the other window. Control 4 looks at the pedestal. Control 5 looks overhead. Control 6 looks at a small part of the engineer station. Control 7 gives a fairly useless view across the cockpit. Control 8 looks at another part of the engineering station. Control 9 goes and shows you the pilot view again. And Control 0 isn't mapped. So I've kind of improved upon that. I've set my own custom views and I detail these in the notes I've written up. So Alt 1 shows you the clipboard. Alt 2 shows you the switch panel on the pilot side. Alt 3 shows you the primary flight instruments. Alt 4 shows you the engine instruments. Alt 5 goes overhead. Alt 6 goes further overhead to the fuel shutoff valves. Alt 7 goes to the pedestal. Alt 8 goes to the engineering. Alt 9 goes further overhead in the engineering. And Alt 0 shows you this other panel, which is for fire testing and the oil control system. Okay. Let's get busy. So first things first, I've mapped the 4 engines to, I've got 2 levers, so you can see I've got them mapped there in the same way you often see this.
Reverse.
Notice there's a Copilot saying things. You can control that in the tablet, so you get these help. I'll leave them on because it's quite entertaining to listen to it from time to time. Let's have a look through the tablet as well. Sorry, the tablet. Look at the clipboard is a bit more basic than a tablet, isn't it? So you have got checklists built in. So if you come in here, you can see we've got the before start checklist and before start engines during warm-up. So we're going to work through all of this in pretty much the same order that it's written down. There's further checklists for normal, so climb, before descent, and so on and so forth. So they're quite useful to have around. If we come back to menu, so did we miss anything here? And I think we've covered everything. Oh, you can have a GPS system if you really want one. I'm going to do without it. Ground and fuel. So you can select very quickly how you want the fuel tanks filled up. So you can say, I want to do like a national flight, which we're going to do, or an international flight, or a transatlantic, and it just fills the tanks up to different levels for you automatically. There's a center of gravity and loadout. So you can see it's flashing at the moment with a potential loadout, and we can turn people on and off and turn their bags on and off. And you can see the center of gravity will move around within its limits. And we can say instant payload, and it will set that into stone, and it's actually happened already. In status, you can go and see a live view of the airplane status while you are using it. So it models all sorts of damage realistically if you let it. So that's in there. Mission orders, I've not really played with this yet. Obviously it'll be covered in the documentation, which I don't have a copy of because Red Wing accidentally threw it away. And you can model failures. So there's all sorts of failures you can turn on throughout the airplane. Right. We were going to go and get this up and running, weren't we? So the first thing on my list was to go and set the fuel up, which we've done. And we are going to go to the CG unload page. We're going to leave it on this page now. We're going to remove the before flying pieces. And if we go and look in here now, you'll see some of the gantries have been pulled away from the airplane now. And remove covers as well. So if we go and have a look now, you'll see all the covers have gone off the engines. Okay, so Alt and 8 takes us over to the engine station. We go and put the battery on, which is over here. I'm going to turn this right up while we're doing this, so you hear sound effects and things as they come on. We can rotate the dome light if we want the light inside, so we can turn that up. So then Alt and 2 takes us over to, now we have the power on, we can go and put the nav lights on. So if we go and look outside, we should see, yeah, you can just see a pixel lit up there in the nav light. And then Alt 8 takes us back to engineering, and we go to the inverters over here. We put the instruments on, the radios on, and the NESA on. I'm not sure what NESA stands for. I haven't looked it up yet. So then we go overhead, and we go and turn all the radios on. So we've got ADF, that one's inoperative. We've got a Bendix radio here. We've got, so this is VHF COM1, COM2, and then NAV1 and NAV2. Then we come back down to the clipboard, and we go and put the ground power on. Oh, it's not letting us do it. Now, why is that? Let's go and have a look, see what we've missed. We did instant payload, didn't we? Why does it not have ground power available? Was it in the primary menu here? I thought we had... Do we have to turn this on? Maybe it's just not available as an option even. That's going to make things interesting then. Oh, of course we're not at a gate, are we? Oh, well, we'll try and see if we can start it without it. I've not covered that in the documentation, so we'll see. We should be okay. So over here, and normally then we would go to kart power at this point, but we can't. So I'm going to have to get a move on with moving through these things. Otherwise, the airplane will go flat if that's modelled. So Alt-7, we check the booster levers. We can do this from F as well. We check the boost levers are pushed forwards, and we push the one down for the elevator. And then Alt-5, we can go to the ordnance switches and turn on the warnings for smoking and seatbelts. So then we're going to go back to that CG and load page, make sure everybody's in their seats. We know they already are. Check the doors are closed. I think they are. So just to show you that, I'll open some doors to show you it. If we put the stairs and the door in place, you'll see you even get an air hostess stood there in the doorway, which is quite cool. So let's go and close those again. So now we're going to prepare for engine start. So Alt and 6. We're going to go and pull the 4 engine shut-off levers down to on or open. Oh, fuel shut-off, I should say. And then in the engineer station, in the fuel tank selectors, the outer 2 have to go all the way forwards, and the inner 2 go to the midpoint for the fuel tank selections. And mixture levers, all of them go to auto rich, which is all the way forwards. Auto rich means you'll be good for mixture up until 10,000 feet, as far as I understand. Beyond that, you'll have to start managing mixture properly yourself. So cowl flaps, this is a real bind because I've tried to hook this up to keyboard keys to make it quicker, and they haven't mapped it in the aeroplane. So we end up having to hold on the cowl flaps. And if you watch here while we're doing it, I'm holding the left mouse button down. We're having to open the cowl flaps one at a time. I've tried to shortcut this to see if it's possible, and you can't. So you literally have to sit here opening the cowl flaps one at a time. You have to do exactly the same thing with the oil cooler flaps as well. So this is going to be the most boring part of getting the airplane ready. I'll show you outside what the result of this is in a moment. So TJ Turner is saying you have to start with the APU. Well, we'll find out, won't we? If we have to, I'll have to go and move the airplane and go back through the first few steps again. I'll fire an engine up very soon to see what happens. So oil cooler flaps. So unfortunately, to make this even worse, the oil cooler flaps are up here. So you can't actually see them unless you stand 10 feet away. So there's number 2. You can see it climbing over here. I won't open them all the way, and we'll see what happens. So there's number 3. So all we're really doing is opening up the vents on the engines. So while we're sat on the ground with the engines running up and taxiing without the rush of air through the inlets, we won't cook the engines. So if I show you what we've done, we've opened up the sides, that's the cowl flaps, and the oil cooler flaps are the ones underneath. Okay, so we've done that. So then we go back over here. We want the carburetor air to be up. Here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we've done the cooler flaps. We've done the mixtures. I'm just checking through things. So then Alt and 2, pilot switch panel. Position lights go to on. And then we can start the engines. This is actually the most straightforward part, really. So we select an engine. The order, as far as I understand, is 3, 4, 2, 1. So engine number 3, press start, then wait for the co-pilot. This is where it'll either work or it won't. Yeah, it's not going to happen. We're going to have to go and put the airplane at the gate. Okay, let's go and move ourselves. That's a shame that... Is there really no way of getting a cart out here to the aeroplane? That seems a bit odd to me. Is there really no way of doing it? Doesn't look like it, does it? Okay, let's go back to the gate then. So, main menu. Don't worry, it won't take long to whiz back through the things we've done. Repetition sets this stuff into your head, doesn't it? This is where somebody pipes up and says, actually, there is a way to do it. We just didn't do it. So, is there... There's no gates at Reading, are there? So we may be changing our flight plan. And the Xbox controller is drifting, which is really helpful. Where should we go from instead then? So we were looking at Reading. We should go for a bigger airport somewhere. There's no big airports up this way. There's one up here, Crater Lake. Has it got gates? That's just parking, isn't it? It hasn't, has it? No, it hasn't got any gates. This is sod's law, isn't it? We're going to have to go like 400 miles away to find an airfield with gates. That's all parking. California Redwood, I wonder. That's all parking. Oh, there is an APU startup as well. Okay. Let's go from this one. So... Rogue Valley. Has that got any gates? Yes, it has. So we're going to go from Rogue Valley instead then. Set that as the departure. That's going to add hundreds of miles onto our route though. Is there really nowhere closer that's got gates? Oh well. Append. That's the wrong thing to do. Just putting some more beacons in. That one can go away now. Delete. Add that. Okay, so we're going to go to KMFR. Just to get a gate. KMFR. I'll have to read up on the... If I can get... I've emailed the developers saying, can you get your documentation out of the bin, please? And let me have a copy of it. Because, yeah, cribbing from the notes on this stuff is painful. So we're going to start from a gate. Set as departure. So yeah, I'll have to put the option in the notes to do either the with the cart or without it as an option. Just wait for the sim to load. Shouldn't take too long. Famous last words. Ready to fly. And we are up against the gate. Very close to a gate, in fact. This is a bit much bigger airport, isn't it? Right. So, turn the head tracking off for the moment. Come in here. Go to the fuel. I think we've probably got enough fuel there, but we'll find out, won't we? CG unload. Passengers are on board. Okay, so remove before flying. Remove the covers from everything. go to the engineer station, put the battery on. It's a sunny day, we don't really need lights, but we'll turn it on anyway on the dome lights. So then we go over and go and put the nav lights on. Then we come back over to the engineering station and we go and switch on the inverters for the instruments, the radios, and NESA, whatever NESA is. Then we go and turn the radios on. So we've got the ADF, COM1 or COM2 and COM1, NAV1 and NAV2, and the transponder. Then we come back to the clipboard. We go and put the ground power. It still won't let me do it. What is going on? Has it? Okay, where's the checklist? How do we force it to have ground power? Ah, I wonder if we can call it up from the ATC in the game. KMF. So now we've got the radios. We should be able to just do it through scroll lock, shouldn't we? I wonder if they've done it that way. Ground services. Tune Medford ground. No. Doesn't look like it. Oh, this is really, really frustrating. So I'm going to have to go and refer to the checklists and see about where we put the APU on. Just reading through to see if there's anything. This is all you have to go on because there is no documentation at the moment because, as I said, the developer's thrown it in the bin by accident. Try spawning the gate to the right that has the gateway. This is funny, isn't it? Main menu again. Okay, one last go. I never had this happen earlier. Absolutely bizarre. I mean, okay, we could go through all the switches and try and find out where how to activate the APU, but it's bizarre that it's just not there. So we put ourselves, if we put ourselves here, gate 71, gate 73, so we'll go for that one and see what happens. That's bizarre though, isn't it, that you're having to hunt out a gate that's got the option. If not, we'll Google it. I think you'll all be pleasantly surprised when we do get this plane up and running eventually, as obviously there's a lot we don't know. As I said, because I couldn't get hold of the instructions. And they're not in the aeroplane folder. So let's have a look. So I'm just going to go and have a look. Someone's just posted something interesting. So there's the prop feathering, oil dilution, galley call, mechanical call. I'm just having a look around to see if it's obvious. Because there's the environmental control system. and the heating. Because that's the ignition for the main engines. There's the boosters for the controls. Okay, let's go and have a quick look and see if it's got the option there. Has it got the... Yeah, we have ground power now, because we're at a gate, obviously. Isn't that bizarre? And so, okay, we can work through it properly now. So, Alt and 1, and make sure ground power... Well, we'll go back through our first few steps again. Make sure we have the correct fuel. And we do. Should we give it more than we need on purpose? CG and load page, do an instant payload just to put the people in the aeroplane. We'll remove the before flying and the covers. Then Alt and 8, go and put the battery on, which is here. And the dome light. Then external lights, we're going to go and put the nav lights on straight away, and then go back over to the engineer and turn the inverters on, so turn the radio and avionics on basically. Go and put the radios on overhead, so ADF, COM2, COM1, NAV2, NAV1 and transponder. Then go and put the ground power on. Hurrah! And if we look outside, bizarrely, even though it's got a jetway there, we don't need it. It's put a ground power there. It's annoying, isn't it? So then we go over to the engineering section and we can switch on cart power to the aeroplane, which will obviously give us the power to spin up the flywheels to get the engines to turn over. So, Alt 7, I want to check those booster levers. So these two have to be forwards, this one has to be down. And then Alt 5 takes us overhead, and we go and put the ordnances on. And we go and make sure all the doors are closed and we finish boarding. Yes, we have. Then Alt 6, we need to come and open the fuel shutoff valves. Then we need to go and select the correct fuel tanks. So the outside levers go all the way forwards, the inside levers go halfway. Then we go to the mixture levers and make sure they're all on auto rich. And the cow flaps, so this is the fun one again, isn't it? So let's just zoom out slightly. So we're watching these needles go up as we open up the cow flaps. This airplane's remarkably quiet at the moment. It won't be soon. It's a thunderous monster of an aeroplane. Okay, cowl flap number 3. So we're just watching these needles as I'm holding the mouse button down on the switch. It's just released itself, look. Probably destroying the mouse doing this. Okay, and cowl flap number 4. There it goes. And then oil cooler flaps, so I'll try and zoom out so we can see them. Here's the needles up here. So number 1, open the oil cooler on engine number 1. So you can see the needle moving up in the top corner up there. See, in the real world, the engineer would just hold all 4 switches up with his hand. and it would take a few seconds to open them all up. But we can't do that because they haven't mapped the keyboard keys to do it. Or sorry, they haven't mapped the controls in the simulator to what these switches are doing, which is really frustrating. I mean, to be honest though, you could just ask the pilots using the AI to just go and do it all themselves, and then you just take over once the airplane's ready to go. So there's the oil cooler flaps open. Carburetor air, so that's these 4 switches here. And then go and put the position lights on. I did check online, this era of aeroplane, they did start the engines at the gate, they don't push back first. So engine number 3 first, so we go and rotate this to number 3, press the button.
One, two, three.
We'll wait for him to count to
4,
6.
5, 6.
We have a big plume of purple smoke and an engine ticking over. So then come back to the engineering station and we put the generator on for engine number 3. And then we do the same for engine number 4. So we start the engine, Alt 5, and we're already on the magnetos for engine number 4.
4, 5, 6.
Roll it to both. Another plume of purple smoke. And then go back across the cockpit again. We turn the generator on for engine number 4 now, and then we go for engine number 2 next. And press the start button. Jump across to the pilots overhead.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's quite interesting that they've got a different voice, because obviously what's happening there is the pilot is looking out of the window counting the revolutions of the blades going round. So just to explain that to you, you know, why that happens. So that was number 2, and then it's finally engine number 1. So start selector to engine number 1, press the start button, go back across to the pilots.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So transponder to both. Another big cloud of smoke. And go back to the engineering station and turn the generator on for engine number 1. So that's the basic startup of the engines. The interesting thing now, you'll notice, yeah, the cockpit is going to shake itself to pieces. But if we increase RPM to beyond about 1500, so just watch those RPM gauges, it will smooth out as we warm the engine up. There we go, look, it suddenly goes smooth at 1500 RPM. Okay, so we'll leave it running at 1500 for a little while, and we'll go and get on with some other things. So we want to go and remove the ground power now. Remove the chocks, they're already done. Remove services and park. Then go back over to the engineering station and we can switch off the cart power now. Then we can go Alt 7 and we can go and cage the autopilot. So what's not obvious here is that will have started a 2-minute counter. So we'll hear an announcement from the co-pilot in 2 minutes time that the autopilot is caged and ready to be used. If you have tooltips on and you hover over the switch, then you'll see the countdown happening. So that's one of the things I was going to mention earlier. One of the things that's quite frustrating is you don't know the status of that. Okay, so preparing to taxi now. So Alt 5 goes overhead. We can go and extend the landing lights. So we just hold them on for a few seconds and turn them on. So it doesn't have taxi and landing lights, it just has the lights. So you can see them there, look. They're cranked down underneath the wings. It's noisy so-and-so, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to turn the volume down for the aeroplane a bit now, so it's not too thunderous. Okay, so we've done the landing lights, so back in the cockpit we'll go and calibrate the altimeter. So I'll press B to shortcut doing that. Calibrate any gyros by pressing D. So a few shortcuts there. We go back over to the engineer station. We're going to go and put the auxiliary fuel pumps on high. We're going to go and pan up and open this green cover and arm the automatic prop feathering. Then down in the cockpit we're going to set flaps for takeoff, so you can see the flap lever just moved there, and if you look outside,
Well, the gyro is gauged.
and that was the call out for the gyro on the autopilot, so you can see the flaps are coming out. Okay, so we can taxi off to the runway. Obviously we can do pushback as well, so if I press Shift and P, I think the wing will just about clear the truck. So I'm going to pull the engines back to tick over now. That's quite close to that wing, wasn't it? So which runway? We want to take off going south. So if we just push back and then turn right and taxi up to runway 14 then. And we'll get the first VOR tuned in. 11625. So this was nav1, wasn't it? 11625. Do we have room to turn yet? Okay, so parking brake back on, Shift P. We don't need the clipboard around anymore, we can put it away. Let me just center this up and then I can sit up. Let's do this from outside, shall we? I've gone the wrong way, haven't I? We needed to turn left, so we're going to do a 360. Yeah. Yep, it has 3 rudders in response to the live stream. So yeah, it looks like it came. I was joking with my other half earlier. I said it looks like it came off the front of a boy's aeroplane annual from 1952, doesn't it? It's a very impressive looking aeroplane. Okay, so did that radio come alive yet? No, it hasn't, but I guess it will when we come off the ground. So there's no such thing in this really as a heading bug. So the way you control the autopilot is you clamp the clutches onto the cables by pushing the knob in, and then you have lateral control and pitch control that you give to the autopilot, and then you use these two knobs, so that turns the aeroplane and that controls its pitch. And it's just up to you to monitor it and use it in a sensible manner. So I think we're probably close enough. As I said, this aeroplane doesn't do the best with frame rate. It's a bit of a frame killer. See, it's stuttering a little bit now and again, even now. Although that could be the weather. Shall we, just to stop the weather from murdering us, should we go and put it on few clouds? And it will help the frame rate enormously. I don't know if you ever noticed this, but yeah, look, it's suddenly a lot smoother. None of the graphics cards like mist, and if it's a very misty day, it spells trouble. Okay, so line up on the runway. So we're going to go to full power for takeoff, and we'll rotate at about 105 knots. So we'll see what callouts we get as well. So indicated airspeed is down here. $70 knots, 80 knots, 100 knots, and pull gently back, and we're in the air. So gear up. So let's get the power back under control, because you can see we're way off the end of the gauges there. We're looking for about 2500 RPM and 34 inches manifold pressure. So this small lever over here is the RPM, if we can grab it. Just winding it back to about 25 on the RPM here. And let's try and trim the elevators while we're flying to stop the airplane falling into the ground. So we're climbing at 1,000 feet a minute at the moment. Flaps can come up.
Roger, flaps up.
We're probably getting these hills are in the way of the VOR signal, to be honest. But we'll find out soon.
Flaps up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I've lost my trim on the oh, it's just taking a while. I am starting to get some elevator response on the trim, which is good. Okay, so let's get that autopilot up and running. So what we do is we push this in, and then we can control.
Autopilot is engaged.
Pitch and. So if I now roll that back slightly, you'll notice the vertical speed will start climbing. So we'll go a couple of notches. And that'll probably be about 500 feet a minute or thereabouts. So let's go a bit more. One more maybe. Oops. So keeping an eye on the airspeed. Keeping an eye on these instruments, so we're roughly on track for RPM and recommended manifold pressure for climb. Flaps are up, gear is up, and we're off on our way. We should pick up a radio beacon soon. We'll double check that frequency. I put in 11625, didn't I? So we're flying out, and we want to be turning right to 160 degrees then. at least. So what we can do is just turn this gently and it will start turning the aeroplane, and we just keep an eye on the compass. Did we get a binnacle compass? Yeah, there's one up there, look. So it's just gently turning, coming up for 160. So we're making the turn there to follow the trek. We'll aim slightly across to go and pick up our original trek. So that's coming up for 165 degrees-ish. So when you finish turning, you just put this back in the middle. Obviously you can turn it more if you wish. So we'll carry on climbing out for a while, and hopefully we'll pick up the signal. So what's the range on this beacon? 40 miles. That explains why then. So if we add range rings to this and put 40 miles on our chart, that's why we haven't seen it yet. Should we have a look from outside? So now we're up and running, we can go and close all of those valves down. So I'm going to do this without the head tracking because it'll be a pain in the backside. So are we going to clear that hill before we do anything? I think we are. This is the problem of trying to do everything at once yourself. So we're now closing the cowl flaps because we have enough airspeed through the engines to look after them. So I'm going to go through each one in turn doing this. Look how small the click spots are. It's about 1 pixel big to get the cowl flap to go down. Oh, we did hit the hill. Let's just fix this. That's so bizarre, isn't it? So we must have been blown sideways. Is there any wind? 2 knots. Okay, we got pushed. 2 knots was enough. Can we control it? Yes, we can. That's why I didn't have damage on, by the way. So let's put the gear back up. This is the problem, by the way, of a 3-person aeroplane, is for a situation like this, you need to have someone flying it at the same time someone else is doing something. You know, it's a problem otherwise. Let's uncage the autopilot for the moment and retrim it. So there's too much for one person to realistically do. I'm just retrimming. Right, so there we go. And we've now lost the autopilot completely. So we have to undo these before we can re-grab. Then we can re-grab these.
He's engaged.
And it will go and recover what it was doing previously. So keep an eye on vertical speed and speed. So we just clipped the hillside, I think, with one of the wings. That's bizarre though, that it looked like we were going to be clear anyway. Let's go and continue on with closing all the cowl flaps. So we've done 1.5 of them so far, and we can't get the 1 pixel's worth of reading on this to do this. There it is. Is that one gone? You can see the ground through that window, so you can see how close you're getting. Yeah, this sort of aeroplane would be fantastic with shared cockpit. There is a system, isn't there, called Your Controls. Where you run the same aeroplane in the simulator alongside each other, and you can work together, and it synchronizes the switch flicks. Okay, that's that done. Now the oil cooler flaps. It's a pain, isn't it? It really is. So let's go and zoom out so we can actually see them. They're way up there, look. So we need to try and get the mouse. I can't even get the mouse within 1 pixel's worth, look, to do it. It's being a pain. There we go. And there's the needle coming down. That's number 2. So a needle should appear there any moment. Famous last words. It actually lost the mouse click. There it comes. And number 3. So we may not bother reopening everything when we get to the other end of this, but we'll do some VOR navigation in a moment. I'm just getting the engines into the right configuration. I think we've got a stall going on. Yep. So what we can do is just tell this not to climb as high. Now, of course, it can't get itself out of it, which is a classic problem with aeroplanes, where they're too dumb to realise what they're doing. Again, this is the problems of having an aeroplane that requires this many crew and trying to do it yourself. And with the switches not being mapped in such a way that you can't easily control it. Right, so that's all the flaps done. What we've actually done, just if you're wondering, is close all the flaps around the engines. So we are now in cruise configuration, essentially. So we've obviously gone past that. Oh no, 1165 is in front of us, so the Omni bearing selector needs to be spun around. So we're going towards south towards it, aren't we? So can we just hold that on? Will it keep spinning? Not very fast, which is probably easier to use the mouse wheel. And now I've lost the Omni bearing selector knob. And again. Oh god, it's a pain in the backside, isn't it? Look at that. The click spots are not great. Okay, so we need to be flying 160 degrees to fly towards the beacon. So we'll turn left then. We'll also tell the aeroplane to go level now. Now it's got some speed up. So the vertical speed should level out. So 160 degrees is coming up. Stop the turn. And you should find now that's interesting. Okay, so has this drifted when we hit the ground? Yes. So I just pressed D to recalibrate the compass. Normally you would check it against the magnetic compass. So we're showing 155. And we wanted to be going 160, didn't we? So let's go and get the airplane to turn. Which is why we're now off. Notice it takes it a while. So you have to be careful if you do a steep turn. Yeah, it's not great at it. So it's do everything in a ponderous manner, I think is the answer. Obviously you can just keep monitoring the instruments as you go. Okay, so once we're in cruise, we ought to be configuring the engines for that. So you want 1600 to 1800 RPM. So we'll look at the RPM here. Let's go and wind it back then to about 1800 RPM. And then power, you want 34 inches still, so yeah, power's looking okay. We can maybe go a little bit less. But beyond that, you then start looking at your fuel burn rate to figure out, you know, how fast you want to go. But beyond that, it's VOR hopping all the way. Yeah, so Candid is saying, this is the problem. There's only one of me. So what we can do to help us out, if we really want to, instead of running around trying to control temperatures and doing everything ourselves, is we can come in here and go to menu, and where is it? Human assistance, so we got that's co-pilot management and flight engineer. We'll put flight engineer on. So the AI flight engineer is now helping, so he'll be taking care of things to get the temperatures down. And obviously he can do things we can't, like, you know, manipulating switches all at the same time as each other. So he's reopening flaps. So you can see, look, he's cranking open slightly the cowl flaps across all 4 engines all at once. So he can do things we can't. What that's doing is allowing more air to go past and cool it down a bit. Okay, so we do have distance measuring equipment. It's over here, look. So we're 10 miles away from the VOR, so we could start thinking about going for the next one, which is 11435 at Reading. So remember, we are not tracking VOR on here, we're just using direction at the moment. So there's nothing to stop us changing frequencies and seeing if we can pick the next one up. So 11435. Do we have a signal? Not yet. So what's the range on this one? Show information for Reading. 25 miles. It's even worse. So we'll add a range ring to it so we'll know when we're getting near. So we really want 11625 tuned back in for the moment, and we'll fly away from it on a radial. 11625. So you can see we're still flying to it. We're 6.5 miles away. So when we come away from it, we'll leave on 143 degrees. We could do it now. So if we change this to 143. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So we want to be going about that direction. So if we were to turn left gently, but not too much, and we should see this fall in towards us, and then we'll continue turning left. So we're on about a 10-degree intercept course at the moment. I mean, we could turn right and play the game of, we're too close to do it though, play the game of come out to this side and get onto the exit radial before we get to it. So remember, we're flying, so that drifted again a couple of degrees. Let's stop the turn. So we're flying about 160. We're wanting to go about what was it, 145, 143-ish. So we should see the needle fall back in as we get closer to the radial. Just give it a few moments. Yeah, so I guess this aeroplane it can be as frustrating as you want it to be, because it does have the artificially intelligent pilot, co-pilot and engineer. So it could essentially fly you wherever you want to go, all on its own. But you can take on more and more workload as befits your lunacy, really. Okay, so we should get the radial coming fairly soon. So we're a mile past the VOR now. Surprised it hasn't happened yet. Yep, here we go, look, the CDI needle is moving. So if we start our left turn again, just gently, we want to match the OBS heading with the aircraft heading. Obviously you have to count for wind as well. So if we go for 150 degrees and stop the turn and see what happens over the next few minutes with the needle. So we want to then figure out, if we drew this on the map as you would have done with a pencil and paper, we know when we get to 36 miles away from this VOR, we should be picking up the next one and can switch over. So we keep an eye on the DME and wait for 36 miles to come up. And while that's happening, we could probably do with climbing, couldn't we? How fast are we going? We're going really slowly, actually. Let's get our move on. Let's open this engine up. And go for 2500 RPM. And ask the autopilot to just gently climb. And let the engineer take care of the engines himself. So Mad Dog is saying, would I recommend the Airbus controls? Are you talking about the Thrustmaster ones? So yes, if that's the case. I think the Airbus joystick is probably the best joystick on the market, if you like joysticks. Or certainly within its price point. Obviously it's not a Whirlpool joystick, but for its price, the Thrustmaster Airbus joystick is fantastic. The sensors in it are brilliant. And the feel of it is brilliant. So, full disclosure here, behind me on the floor is is it Logitech these days? An X56 HOTAS stick and throttle. I've used them for one evening and I haven't plugged it back in. I've gone back to the Airbus one at the moment. How are the passengers? Should we go and have a look? See if they're screaming. So that the cup of coffee and the book, this is worth having a look at. This little book usually lives over here on the shelf. It's the reference guide for all of the configurations of the aeroplane. So you can go flicking through it and look at it all. It's amazing. Anyway, sorry, we were going to go and look at the passengers, weren't we? So if we go and make ourselves a bit taller while we're on our way down there. They seem happy enough. Not perturbed by us skimming a hillside at all. Although he looks like he might have PTSD though. And he's not talking. And oh dear, that's like a horror movie right there. And him. Maybe we'll close the door and pretend they're not there, hey? How do we... Oh, crikey, can we close the door? Yes, we can. So I've not looked at this radio kit yet to know... Okay, that's inoperative then. You can't actually use this, it's just here for effect. Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? What about this battery on the floor? What's that for? De-icer and air pump. This is where we end up pulling the carpets up and discover all manner of things under the floor that we didn't know were there. So that's fuel cross feeds. See, I'd not even noticed this before. And this is all... Okay, it's not working. What does that do? Famous last words. I'm not going to click it because I don't know what that does. There's so many things to play with in this cockpit, aren't there? So what's that altitude? We're still climbing. So we've just come up to 10,000 feet. That's a good altitude to fly at, isn't it? And it should keep us out of trouble with the hills. Should we have a look on little nav map? If we pull up the altitude plot, yeah, look. So we can level out now. We're not going to hit anything. Famous last words. How are we doing on navigation? So we're almost on the needle. So if we were to fly 143 degrees, so go left a little bit, although you have to factor in the wind. So we've got a 4-knot crosswind. So by countering it ever so slightly, we're almost doing the right thing. So let's go left a few degrees at least. So you'll see the compass will start to rotate very gently. You can see the aircraft is banked very gently. So that's probably enough. So should we actually land this at Reading rather than carry on for hundreds and hundreds of miles? Let's see how we get on. So if we were to come in, we'll come in over the top of Reading and descend back down over the valley here. We'll circle maybe, orbit the airfield, put the ILS in and bring it in for a manual landing. See, I held off buying the Constellation for a long time because when it first came out, as someone's alluded to in the comments, it wasn't great. It's been seriously upgraded several times. It still isn't. You can see some of the textures are quite ropey here and there. It still doesn't look as good as some of the other aeroplanes, but I think the problem with that is the bar has been lifted again and again in the simulator. So, you know, there's quite a few aeroplanes that look photorealistic and that perform very well. And this isn't too far away, and it's interesting enough through all of the different systems it simulates that you can have lots of fun with it. Okay, so we're holding altitude at 10,000, or just beneath 10,000. We're pretty much holding the VOR, which is coming up to 27. We said 36 miles, didn't we? And we should be able to pick up the Reading VOR. Let's have a look from outside. It does look pretty, doesn't it? So we've left the engines in climb configuration and it's still not going that fast. Should we see what happens if we really push it? So let's go and open it up. See if the engineer will complain. So the RPM is right on the beginning of the yellow area. So if we go and have a look at these needles a bit closer to see what the colour coding is on them. Okay, so we should be okay in the yellow area. Famous last words. In fact, is that a green end to the yellow? Or am I imagining that? It's interesting that you can push the engines so far beyond the green area on manifold pressure. Also, it's interesting that even though I've got them mapped to the same axis, the needles are not the same. So there's some variance there from one engine to the other. You can see there, look. I'm just wondering how fast we can go at 10,000 feet. It's not the fastest aeroplane in the world, is it? Look, the co-pilot, sorry, the engineer has cranked open the cowl flaps again because we're pushing the engines. So yeah, I've just seen Nobby's comment about WinWing making left-handed joysticks. It's an interesting one, isn't it? It never occurred to me. And years ago, before I did any YouTube stuff, I would have been absolutely fine with the right-hand stick. But as soon as you want to maintain control of the aeroplane and use a mouse to do things, you're in trouble. And I think it's only a content creator problem, really. If you're just going to be doing good dogfighting, it's not a problem at all. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to... I did wonder about... I've got a Stream Deck here. So I could make some pages up on it with all of the controls I need. And use that to get away with it, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've gone past 39 miles. Let's go and tune in Reading VOR now. So 11435. You need to get lower in the cockpit. 11435. And it's switched to 2, and we're 20 miles out. We need to be flying 140 degrees, flying just under 150 at the moment, so we're just going to command a left turn. We'll go a little bit less than 140, or more than 140, sorry, because of the wind. We've got a wind coming in from the right. Okay, so we can watch the let's start descending. So if we do this and pull the RPM back a bit, back into the safer area. Come back to 25 and let's see if we come down at 1500 or 2000 feet a minute. See if what will happen with the airspeed. So it's accelerating, isn't it? So we may have to play games with coming down a bit less of a rate. Descending to 8,500 feet. So what altitude is Reading at? Let's find out. 505 feet above sea level. You can see we're zooming off at a slight angle, which will be reflected here. If we press D, yep, this is drifted again. So it would have to be part of your checklist, you know, on a schedule to keep checking the gyro compass against the binnacle compass or magnetic compass. It drifts alarmingly. So let's put the clipboard away. So we're going to rely on the co-pilot to do what he needs to do. Actually, I wonder if that's where the mission comes into it. So we saw earlier there was orders, weren't there? So can you say that we're doing a particular... So I want... Well, that'd be for the co-pilot, wouldn't it, though? But we could say just descent power, I guess. Because I was just thinking, the co-pilot doesn't know what you're planning to do unless you tell him. That's what this is for, then. To configure the aeroplane for a given phase of flight. This is very similar to the DC-6, isn't it? Everybody, well, everybody I know calls the automated co-pilot in the DC-6 Gary. Because of a certain friend online that coined the phrase that he'd thrown quite a few Garys, he'd fired quite a few Garys and made them leave the aeroplane while in flight. Okay, so we're 4 miles out and we're off to the left of the airfield, which obviously we can see. So we're going to turn about another 15 degrees right in a moment. So if we look out the window, there's the airfield. And we'll be going there momentarily. So let's stop the descent. And we probably want to... Well, the speed will bleed off now. Yeah, we'll leave the power where it is. Let the speed bleed off. We'll go and retune now to 10870 for the ILS frequency. And we'll set the Omni bearing selector to the runway direction, which is 346 degrees. I've gone the wrong way on the compass, haven't I? That was clever of me. It was shorter the other way. Only marginally, but... So we're just setting this to 346 degrees. DME is now to the end of the runway. As you can see, we've got glide slope and localizer in play. So we'll go out to about 10 miles out, I guess. Let's go and turn this to the same direction, or the reciprocal, sorry, so we can look across the Omni bearing selector. We want 160 or 160-ish. It's not turning enough, is it? So there's 150 coming up. And there's 160. So stop the turn. We should be flying reciprocal now, almost, or thereabouts. And we're 8 miles out. So should we go manual? So let's go and pull the clutch out from the autopilot, turn both of these off, so we have control. Obviously in the cloud we can't really see very much, but we can just see, look, there's the glide slope. So we're almost at the right altitude. Should we sit up so we can see outside as we do this? So if we have a look, you can see what we're doing here. Just spinning the aeroplane round towards the runway direction. So engine's back to idle almost. So I've put the gear down, which will help put some drag in. So you can see we're off to the right of the glide slope, but we're intentionally coming in at an angle. We're almost down to flap speed now. So I'm going to straighten up the angle we're at. We might not be at enough of an angle actually. Let's go back left a little bit, just to tighten up the intercept course to make sure we do intercept. The glide slope's looking fine. Speed's now within flaps range. So we go to the first stage of flaps. Yeah, you can see the runway out there, look. So we'll turn in towards the localizer in a moment. A little bit high. I'm trying to lose speed, that's why I'm trying to keep the nose high.
Flaps 100%.
You can see the localizer is coming in. Glide slope's pretty much there. You can get the autopilot to lock onto both localizer and glide slope, by the way. So, first landing coming up in the Super Constellation. Let's see how we get on. Keeping an eye on the speed. We've got the automated flight engineer who is dancing on the switches in the back of the cockpit. Low.
500 feet.
The Pappies look okay, but the glide slope's saying we're too low.
400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 30. 20. Roger, flaps up. Flaps up.
That was good fun, wasn't it? So, yeah, I really do need the documentation, though. I'll have to wait for the developers to find that for me. It's a shame that it's not available, because that would have solved our problem with the APU earlier. Because I'd only found one way of starting the airplane so far. There obviously is another way. Otherwise, you can't start it from a parking spot, which is annoying. Should go and park underneath the tower over there. I think this is a GA parking, isn't it? I've got the other airplanes turned off on purpose. Okay, so I'm guessing to kill the engines, all we need to do is pull the mixtures, isn't it? Just want to see what the animations look like. And rather than run through all of the things that we would need to do to shut the airplane down, we can take advantage of the automated flight engineer. So if we go to orders and say parking.
On parking checklist. Brake selector lever. Emerge. Eau dilution.
Set.
Engine 1 ignition off. Engine 4 ignition off. Engine 2 ignition off.
It's cool, isn't it?
Engine 3 ignition off. Chokes on. Ordnance lights.
Set.
Stairs. Checked.
There's the stairs.
Doors.
Open.
Pins. On. Unparking checklist completed. Ordnance lights.
Off.
It's a shame it loses sound in the back of the cockpit, isn't it? Or in the back of the cabin, I mean. So there we go. That's the Red Wing Super Constellation in Flight Simulator. Obviously, I'm still learning with it. This is based on one evening of finding my feet with the aeroplane, and as you saw, there are lots of things I don't know yet. Hopefully when I get hold of some actual documentation for it, I'll be able to do some more flights and be a little bit more informed rather than trying to guess how things work. But you saw the challenges of the three-man crew, and it's really great that you do have the option of having an automated flight engineer, for example. Because as you saw, despite my best efforts to do everything, it's kind of impossible, because you'll end up just cooking the engines or skimming a hillside or whatever it happens to be. And the engineer, the automated engineer, can do things you can't. You know, he can do things quickly in parallel. Like he's got both hands to flick all the switches at once, for example. But there's us fishing around with a mouse, trying to flick switches. But anyway, I love the challenge, though, of doing that sort of thing, and just to understand how the aeroplanes work, how the different systems interoperate and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. That was good fun. So that's the Red Wing Lockheed L1049 Super Constellation. I bought it for about $40, I think it was, whatever that converts to in pounds. It's quite expensive, I think, for what it is, but there's a lot of aeroplane there to play with. And if you like this era of aeroplane, I don't think it's as polished as the DC-6 from PMDG. That one has always set the standard, hasn't it, for vintage aeroplanes. But this isn't far away, and it's good fun. It's slightly different. But yeah, I'll see you again soon.